Hello everyone. It's an honor to be sharing with you today, and I am so thankful for the other speakers at this conference and all the wisdom they bring to the table as well. You know, I am constantly reminded that there are so many different ways of leading kids and family ministry, and we have so many diverse contexts, right? So how do we train, encourage, and support each other in ministry if everyone's experience is really so different? I know much of my own learning comes from sharing story and sharing experiences, and then watching and noticing what sparks curiosity or excitement. So today, what energizes you? What gets your wheels turning? Because what we know is that we can't do it all. We might think we can, we might hope we can, we might try, but really we can't do all the things. So today I'm here talking about building a team in a pandemic. And I want to begin at my favorite place, which is the dreaming and visioning what could be. So would you enter this dream scenario with me? Your church leadership has made a decision about how to do ministry for this next season, and you have been included in the conversation, and you provided input for the decision. And so you email your large and overfull children's ministry volunteer team to tell them about the plan. And you get a ton of great responses and folks lining up on Zoom and email to help you execute the ministry hopes and dreams that you have for fall and winter. Yeah! And then you wake up from this lovely dream and you realize, that's never gonna happen, right? But it doesn't change the fact that we keep dreaming. Kids ministry pastors and directors we're dreamers and doers. It's how a lot of us are wired. We can embrace that. But it's often difficult when reality doesn't meet our hopes and dreams or our goals and expectations. So part of our work is to just own that and name it. I also want to be clear about something right up front, because this talk is about building a team in a pandemic. I'm here to tell you today that you are also human. You are also in this pandemic. You are also juggling many, many things. And you, as the kids ministry pastor, director, or even volunteer leader, maybe you don't have the capacity to build a team right now, and that's okay too. You know, when Jesus first started his ministry, what did he do? He showed up bringing his full self into the spaces that he found himself in, and he loved people well. He truly saw people as they were, and he spoke to them and ministered to them and told them stories about the kingdom of God. He wasn't just, building a system or a structure. He was being present. He was being faithful to God's love and justice for all people, and he was aware of what was going on in the world around him and what words of life and encouragement the people needed. And that's what we can do too for our own context. Be present, be like Jesus, love people well. That is good, and your presence is enough. All right, but now you might be saying, no, really, I am building a team or rebuilding or reimagining volunteer ministry in a pandemic. What does it look like, Katey? Give me some ideas. Okay, I will do my best, but I just want to name that our church is also still figuring this out right now. We're still learning what we are supposed to be doing in this season. I did decide to reach out to some friends across the country to see what types of ministry they're doing with their volunteer teams. And so here are some examples from a lot of different churches, different sizes, different demographics, different contexts. We have churches who have kids ministry volunteers that are serving as a prayer team. We have volunteers who are writing letters to students. There are teachers that are teaching virtually, and leadership teams for children's ministry. They're just kind of gathering as a small group, maybe focusing on what do we need to do right now. There's churches that have volunteer ministries that are doing family wellness phone calls or sending text messages. We've got Marco Polo going on between volunteers and kids. There are even parent groups or community groups, life groups, that have still managed to go on virtually and continue meeting. Some of our churches are doing drive-through events or online VBS, or midweek Zoom check-ins. There's churches that are creating family kits and delivering them to people's houses. What this tells me is that there are a lot of ways to build a team in a pandemic and to do family ministry. Now, if we look at the research around kids ministry right now, here's some interesting stats that are coming out of the Barnett Group. So looking specifically at children's ministry, they're saying that 1 in 3 churches, about 34%, are now offering digital resources for children's ministry. And then about a quarter have this kind of increased social media presence. And then about a quarter of churches, kind of just in general across the board, are doing an online Sunday school or Bible classes. Pastors are also reporting that based off of everything they've seen and heard from people in their church, 94% of parents are running the spectrum from a little bit overwhelmed, about 40% of families, and then 1 out of every 5 parents is saying, I am completely overwhelmed by this pandemic. So those are just some of the realities that we are working with as we consider what it means to do ministry and to build teams and to work with our volunteers. Now, in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of us probably said, well, let's slow down, right? Let's lower our expectations. We're in a pandemic. Let's kind of ride the wave and see, what's going on. And in the middle, we started to notice, okay, this is going to go on for a while. This summer we're like, yeah, there's no going back to normal. So when will we know what the new normal is? And now, 7 months in, we really have no idea when the season is going to come to an end. We don't know how long we're going to be in pandemic mode in children and family ministry. So what do we do? What do we pause? What do we keep doing? What do we change? Is what we're doing right now going to be our new normal? Building a team in a pandemic can feel very short term, but we also have to be realistic in naming that it could really be a long-term shift for us. So I've come up with 10 things for us to consider while building a team in a pandemic. And I've created a PDF of this. You might already have it now. If you don't, you can certainly email and ask for it. I'm happy to send it. But these are 10 things that I thought we could all consider no matter what our context is. And the first is this: every context is different. I'm going to repeat it over and over. It's really important for us to embrace that, to really understand that. It's especially important because we don't want to play the comparison game. It's not good for any of us. How can we be inspired by what other children and family ministries are doing, the one down the street or the one on social media that you follow, but not compare ourselves to others? And the best way to combat this temptation is to know your own community, to know your people, and to know their needs. So 2 really great questions you might ask yourself right now is, what feels most important right now? And what do people need? Now, the answer to those questions, it might look drastically different from what you were planning or what you were hoping for. And so your challenge might be, how do you pivot from what you want to do to what the people really want or need? Now, maybe your parents are like, I don't even know what I need, just whatever. If they don't know what they need, then they're relying on you to listen for the Holy Spirit to give wisdom and discernment. And if that's the case, then your spiritual health is really vital to this time. The second thing about building a team is to remember again that we are in a pandemic. And this is something that we have never walked through before. People's emotional and mental wellness is really important. It's also important for us to consider those who are most vulnerable in our community and in our context. Ministry is going to look very different for them. How can we do children and family ministry in a way that's inclusive for everyone in our community? I am finding that it's really okay for us to lower our expectations on what we produce and increase our expectation of how God will show up and will meet the needs of the people. I want to say that one again. It's okay to lower our expectations of what we produce and increase our expectation of how God will show up, how the Spirit will come and do a work that we could not have even asked or imagined for. That is the work that God can do in our midst. The third thing to consider is people over programs. What would it look like for you to build a volunteer team and to build a system that allows kids leaders to have one-on-one engagement, to make sure that every family in your congregation or your community is seen and acknowledged? How can you equip your volunteers to check in with parents and children on a systematic basis? This is really important during a pandemic. And you also want to ask at this time, what do your kids leaders need and how are they feeling? If you just aren't quite sure where people are at, kids, parents, or volunteers, now would be a great time to put out a really short and simple doodle poll to get a temperature of your community. All right, the fourth thing is we can't ask volunteers to do what we aren't also willing to do. This is like classic leadership 101. It doesn't mean that we have to do everything, and it doesn't mean that we have to do it all on our own. But building a team in a pandemic is about partnership. This is not new. Hopefully it's not new to us. Building a team in pandemic is about partnership, okay? The fifth thing, we know that people really want to make a meaningful contribution right now. It's really important for folks that whatever they're putting themselves into, that it's significant, because there's not a lot of room for margin right now. So when we're serving, when we're volunteering, when we're contributing to something, we want it to count for something, right? So we, as children's ministry leaders, can set people up with clear expectations and the necessary training so that what we're asking people to do for us, they can do well. So policies and procedures and following health guidelines, it's going to be really important in this season with volunteers. And creating a team with purpose and clear goals where everyone knows their role and what they're committing to. This is going to demonstrate love and care for our ministry teams. All right, number 6, build a team that supports parents and caregivers as the primary spiritual mentors of children's faith. And then for those students who are not in a family of faith, build a team of mentors that walks with students who need support in their spiritual discipleship. So our ministry team, it's not about a Sunday morning experience. It's about discipleship and ongoing care and partnership and relationship with parents and caregivers. And so our teams are shifting their focus, their priority, and they might even need some new training in how to do that as well. Parents and caregivers are primary spiritual mentors of children's faith. And this isn't new either, but we get to see it in a new way in this season. So even as we consider how we're building teams, we're thinking about who the team is for in a different way. All right, and this leads us right into number 7. Build a team that can help families respond to the spiritual and cultural moment we are in. Can we read this cultural moment, what is going on in our nation, and use our kids ministry platform to guide families into meaningful faith and life conversations? This is so important. So much of Jesus' life was both prayer and action, right? Jesus spent time alone with God in worship and prayer and devotion on the mountain or the hillside or the early morning or on the boat by himself or on that walk. But he was also in the center of community life, speaking truth to power and breaking down walls that divided, insiders and outsiders. And he was bringing healing and peace to people and villages and, individuals and communities. He was challenging the religious institution to see all people and to love all people. Well, how do we use this moment to equip our volunteers, to challenge and encourage families to pay attention to what God is doing around them? How can they use their voice and use their body and their financial resources to live into their faith? This is discipleship. This is what we're called to. And part of our job in building our teams is equipping volunteers to help families in this spiritual and cultural moment we are in, to make every moment of their family faith formation count. And this leads me to number 8. The 8th thing I think it's important for us to consider as we build a team in pandemic is to invest in our volunteers' health, well-being and their training? How are you creating space to care for your team that you are building or rebuilding or reimagining? In this heightened season of racial violence, in our civil rights advocacy that is happening right now for Black and brown children and youth, for elders, for adults, we have to ask ourselves, how are we caring well for whole people? I'm especially mindful of leaders of color doing ministry in mostly white contexts, whether that's you yourself or maybe folks in your volunteer teams. Are folks receiving the care they need? Is the ministry context that you're in a safe space for people to bring their full selves, to be seen with their full giftedness? And we can evaluate and reflect on that. And we may need to make changes and adjustments to make sure that our ministry spaces are set up for the thriving of all individuals and not some. And this reflection for our teams, it also applies to our kids and our parents. In our communities, whatever your context, is it a space where everyone can thrive? And this is really important for us. And while this pandemic is causing really radical shifts in how we do ministry, it's also this beautiful opportunity and really important opportunity to examine the ways that we've done ministry in the past. And we can ask God, what are you transforming? What are you making new in me and our ministry team that's going to lead toward our ability to see every child, every family with the fullness of dignity and humanity that they deserve? There's some really great inspiration on this topic in a documentary called The Biggest Little Farm. It's about a couple who bought a kind of dead and dried up farm in California. And it's their journey of nurturing it back to life and what they discovered along the way about the gift of diversity in what we would call God's creation. It's a powerful and just really dynamic, and it's full of beautiful analogies for ministry, even in our pandemic reality. But how are we reflecting and evaluating and investing in our volunteers' health and well-being? And this leads us to our last two things I just want to share really briefly. To see parents and caregivers of the children in our community as our ministry team. You want to build a team in a pandemic? Turn to the people who are doing the ministry already, which is the parents. They're the ones who are daily and weekly nurturing the faith of children. So we can invest in the parents and caregivers' faith formation so that they can pour into their children. This is our team. These are our people. And last, but certainly not least, to make sure that you are taking care of your own body, mind, and spirit. As you build a team in pandemic, remember that you cannot lead others to a place you have not already gone before. We talk in our church, in our staff, a lot as we do kind of weekly reflections on how our soul is doing, or how our body is doing, or how our mind is doing. We often come to this reminder that in these difficult seasons, we become more aware of how desperate we are for God in our own life. And that desperation for God can lead us into places where we sit on those green pastures by quiet waters, where we find refuge in who God is. And it's really important for us to care for ourselves, to take time to care for ourselves, for our family, for our homes, so that we can be nourished and filled, so that we can offer that care to those that we're ministering to. So your care of yourself is a way that you can care for your community, and your building up of yourself, your resilience, your strength, your inner fortitude and relationship with God is actually what will bless the building of team and the connecting with the people that you're serving alongside. So I have so enjoyed thinking about this topic of building a team in a pandemic, and I hope you are encouraged, and I just want to say bless you.